Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode, and this is on climate change leader in 21st century. We have our speakers, famous scholars, Professor Viva from Canada, as well as we have our speakers, Mr. James Eid from USA. Hopefully it will be very interesting discussions on climate change, what we have to do, how we have to play a role for solving this problem. Even in COVID-19 situation, we are observing that we need global collaboration, we need to work together, we need to solve together, we are in trouble. So in that situations, we need to take a proper strategy for climate change. Professor Viva has very unique innovations on climate change related things. She is a famous scholar. James is also with his foundation. He is doing excellent work in Africa and other developing countries. So I want to start from Professor Viva. How do you want to analyze the leadership role in climate change area? As well as we have our Professor Dev, another famous writers and scholars from USA. So Professor Viva.
Yes, I guess the best place to start is, who's responsible. We have to determine that, who's ultimately responsible, and then find ways to hold them accountable. In the carbon markets that have developed, there's a private carbon market, voluntary, and as we can tell, they've only been able to remove about 300 million tons of CO2 equivalent gases from the atmosphere using voluntary carbon markets. Now, I hear that the banking world is coming out with a greatly expanded voluntary carbon market, but my analysis of the carbon markets is that the honor system doesn't work very well, and the sooner we realize that what we need to do is take the science and get political and hold the politicians accountable to make who is responsible accountable. So we know from forensic science a lot of that information already. So we also need to help the judiciary people, the judges, to really draw the line between who's responsible and who's accountable by way of either private litigation or direction to our government leaders to legislate. So there's the legislative side as well as the litigation side. So those fronts need to be pushed on, and those are available in Asia as well as in the Western nations, and a lot of people are aware of this. So we just need to keep piping up with our voice to our political leaders to get the shift around this done. And that means, more demonstrations and more letter writing, but we really don't have a choice because the political levers need to be moved even further than they are now, so that we have the political people in office working on actual technology. We need them to get to the point where they're working on actual technology like ours, and just to remind people, our company removes greenhouse gases by dispersing hydroxyl radicals. So we're working towards the X Prize competition. We've entered, we're an official entrant, so we're in that competition to be expanding and scaling up if we get selected for the first round. So that's what I'd like to say as an introductory remark.
Thank you, Professor. We have our another professor, world famous professor, Professor Dev. He has a very interesting book. I'm sure from Asia Pacific, you will get a very good guideline, especially the youth community and the family persons. Then they can understand what they have to do. And even yesterday, Professor Dev actually gave me a very interesting analysis on climate change leaderships. So he may share some interesting view with us. Then I request my friend, he support me, Mr. James Eid. Professor Dev, how do you want to analyze?
Well, I'll try to go through some of the things that I wrote to you yesterday, because I think that I was thinking deeply about this. I don't think that we can get where we need to go by doing what we did in the past. That's magical thinking. But we need leadership from people to support the leadership at the top. We need to get well past the idea of raising awareness. That's the problem, I think, with the solution up to now has been to get people to be afraid. Be afraid, be very afraid. Look at my scary slides. Look how terrible it's going to be. Watch these polar bears drowning. Don't you feel terrible? But that doesn't get us anywhere. That's just awareness. And it's nice to be aware. But if you don't start taking steps up the stairway to advocacy, you're not going to go anywhere. So unfortunately, the political leaders are not social scientists. And they think that pretty speeches can take the place of rolling up their sleeves and going step by step to success. So what I want to talk about is what those steps are. How we, the people, get the leaders to follow us, because they really aren't leaders. We call the people in charge leaders, but they're actually followers. What they're doing is waiting for us to tell them where they want to go. That's how the electoral system works. That's why we have such a mess in the United States right now, because the people who are supposed to be leaders are listening to what the people are saying, and their group of people are telling them, don't do anything, be afraid, be very afraid. And that's where we've got to draw the line. We've got to say, okay, we're the leaders, we're the grown-ups, even our children are grown-ups. People like Greta Thunberg are much more attuned to what needs to be done than a lot of our leaders. So what we have to do is get leaders from every neighborhood in society and get those leaders to talk to their people, but also to take steps. If I don't clean up my environment, then I can't ask you to clean up your environment. So what I think we need to do is get every family in the world attuned to going green. And then we're going to start making some progress. But if we expect it to trickle down from the top, it's not going to work. Trickle down has to meet with bubble up. And that's how change always takes place. It doesn't take place by sort of the Bill Gates approach. Us big people are going to solve the problem for you. No, that's not how it works. The way it works is us little people solve the problem locally, and then it builds up from the household to the village, from the village to the neighborhood, from the neighborhood to the town, from the town to the city, from the city to the state, from the state to the country, to the world. And that's what I'm working on with the Green Actioneer program, because we go into schools and work with kids and parents. We won't work with kids unless the parents are there. And then we go step by step through our book that tells them everything they can do in order to go green. We don't blame and shame. This isn't about climate change and global warming. It's about going green. It's not about the problem. It's about the solution. So that's where I stand. I think it's time for us all to get on board the solution boat and row an oar. Everybody get an oar. We're going to solutions.
Yes, this is actually great explanations. Actually, World Talent Economy Forum, we are also trying to involve with grassroots level people. We are trying to engage with Asia Pacific, Africa's, even we are trying to making a very good bridging in between developed nations and developing nations, and we are trying to figure out the way how we can minimize the gap. So there is a huge gap. Yes, developed nation has wealth, developed nations has knowledge, developed nations has like very powerful capacities. So developing nations, we have to make a proper collaborations, and this is the ultimately objective of World Talent Economy Forums. We believe in people, we believe in modern science, engineering and technology, and we want to make a proper relationship in between developed nations and developing nations. Mr. Jamsid, you have a very good experience on this bridging, these relationships, as well as you are playing a very good roles for African nations and other developing nations. So how do you want to analyze your idea about climate change leadership and how we can play roles and how we can work together?
Thank you, Sharif, for the opportunity to speak on this subject, this vitally important subject. And I commend you again for the job that you're doing, the panelists that you're assembling. And I do believe in the trickle-down effect, but what trickles down is not health and it is not wealth. So we have to, it's not an either-or situation, top-down or bottom-up. It's both. We need both. And so this solution, and getting into solutions, I love hearing that. And starting with yourself is what I practice and what I preach. Do what you can for yourself. If you can afford solar panels on your home, if you have a home, do it. If you can afford to buy an electric car, do it. Whatever you can do, and don't ever give in to despair. If you think, oh, it doesn't matter what I do, picture me slapping you in the face, because it does matter if enough people do it. And so if I just am one of none, then what I do doesn't matter. But if I'm one of many, it matters. So start with yourself. Then you affect your community. And then who knows how far it can go. Maybe it goes from your community to the next one, to the next one. And all of a sudden, there's a massive movement of change. And I think it's entirely incumbent upon the young to seize this and to embrace the power that the young have. I grew up in an era where we felt we could make social change, and we did. Now, did it solve all of the world's problems? No. No, you just keep persevering. So don't give in to despair and continue to persevere, but start with yourself. Change yourself. And then those that are in your sphere of influence, you can change them. And then they have a sphere of influence and they can change others. So yes, do we need political solutions? Yes. Do we need economic solutions? Yes. Do we need society to change? Yes. But how do you do that? You start with yourself. And then you start electing public officials who are consistent with your values, consistent with what you know that the planet needs. Because we need to work on this starting yesterday, but we can't operate in the past. So all we have is today. Start today. Because if we make our goals, technology will solve it, or we'll wait until the ocean is on fire before we start to address it. It will be too late. So we must start now, and we must continue to struggle with this problem in all of its aspects, because it's a myriad of problems. It's a complex problem. However, don't give in to the complexity. Do what's the simplest thing, the right thing right now for you, and continue to push your neighbors, push your community, push your politicians, and vote for people that are consistent with the way you think. And pretty soon they'll start responding, because absolutely, Dave is absolutely right. They are followers. They're taking polls and they're listening to what their voters want them to do. Well, what do you want them to do? Do you want them to give subsidies to fossil fuel industries? Well, you're part of the problem. Be part of the solution. Get those people into the jobs that pass policy that are going to help the planet. Because as you start with yourself, you change yourself, but not in a selfish way. You have to start thinking of others, because this is a global problem and we're in this together. Thanks again, Sharif, for having me on.
Thank you. Even World Talent Economy Forums, as a think tank, we are trying to helping different developing countries to introduce different kind of green technology in energy sectors, in smart city projects. Even right now we are working with, it's a small project, 7 megawatt solar projects in South Asia. But day by day, we are trying to convince. Even last week, you saw different political persons, even though different decision makers, corporate house from South Asia, they are joining. And every day they are observing, and we are working beside these discussions, we are working with the real world projects, and most of the cases we are convincing. Right now we are working with 7 megawatt solar project. Hopefully we will be successful. Government already give us permission to install these projects, so we are very much hopeful that with the help of global community like Professor Viva, Professor Dave, Manuels, Mr. James, we can do more contribution in developing nations, because we always discuss about technology, innovations, investment, but people is very important for us. We do not ask too much about people. Developing nations has huge population. Asia Pacific, 40% population around the world live in Asia Pacific, and more than 50 to 7% actually youth. Those who are under 30%, they are the future. They are the future of this world. The more we can develop a better ecosystem for them, we will be happy that we are doing some progression with climate change related things. But definitely we need to do more projects and practical works. So we need your support as a global influentials, as a intellectuals. We need all of your support. Mr. Manuel, how do you want to share your experience from Africa, as well as how do you want to explain about climate change leadership role and responsibility?
Sure. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's a really great topic, and I'm glad to be here. So, yeah, I would say that in the past decades, we saw uh, a lot of impacts coming from the global warming and the climate change, and also the rise in the temperature of our planet, and rising from 1.2 degrees Celsius to 1.5 and even beyond. So yeah, it's important that we come up with some sustainable methods that we can implement to solve those issues. So yeah, I would say that like other guest speakers mentioned it before, there are some responses coming from different governments, coming from different activists from around the world, and also there are some scientific societies and some researchers, some universities who are also pursuing some research to see the way they can also contribute to solve the issue that is going on. So, based on my background, like in the space industry, I would say that one of the goal of the United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs is the implementation of space technologies to solve the issues that are going on Earth. And one of those main issues is the climate change. So, at the Space Generation Advisory Council, we usually propose some projects where satellite-based technologies can be used to solve climate change issues. So I can give some of those examples. For example, we can use satellites for remote sensing, for Earth observation, like I said, and also using the data, um, satellite imagery data, we can make some predictions on the different uh, climate change. uh, we can also use satellite-based technologies for forest fire monitoring, for example, and also in case there is a disaster, satellite image. We can use satellite imagery to send real-time data to those who are in the logistic management team, who needs to know exactly the part of the region that are more affected, so that they can deploy people as soon as possible. So we can also use satellite data for that. And also, yeah, I can give one more example. We can use drones equipped with some instruments, some specific instruments that can help to measure and monitor and track the air pollution or the atmospheric pollution. That also can be a solution for the climate change situation that we are facing around the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Professor Dev, you are bringing a very important strategy like grassroots level strategy, how we can get involved with more remote area peoples. Uh, so, what is your advice? Besides that, how I want to say uh, the governments or example corporate house or university play roles to create awareness for these grassroots level peoples, because I'm from the practical field. Example, when we discuss with these different kind of grassroots level people, different developing nations, still we are far more behind. Yes, the developed nations, even US presidents and all of the big countries president, now they are committed about climate change. But if you want to get the real feedback from the grassroots level people, I want to say 90% people still not aware about climate change. But climate change real, they are affected by this climate change. Even few days ago we are observing India's and Bangladesh and this area, they are highly affected for this climate change issues, for yes, different kind of cyclones and many things. So what is the role of these policymakers? How and when they can start their work for them?
Yeah. Well, the real question is how do cultures change?
Exactly. Mhm.
And the way that cultures change is that not because somebody at the top tells them to change. That's the last thing. It starts with the change of consciousness. I'll use an example from my own career. In 1966, I went to South Korea to help them to create their family planning program. At that point, South Korea had 30 million people, and the average family had 6 kids. And son preference predominated. You had to have 3 boys, 1 boy for the military, 1 boy for the priesthood, 1 boy to run the business. After that, you could have more boys. Girls, we didn't care about. The average per capita income was $800 a year. So here's 30 million people intent on doubling their population and doubling it again within the next 50 years. So I show up with contraception as the solution. When we looked at the problem, my Korean colleagues and I, we said, well, we could start a big broadcast program and try to do this with media and try to do this with the government telling people what to do. But we decided that the best way to do it was to go to the village, not talk to the men. The men, in a sense, were the culprits in this problem. They were the ones who wanted the sons. So we started training field staff. And the field staff were all women. They were all in their 20s to 30s. They had had a child, or they'd had 2 kids. And their job was to go door to door in the village, let women know nothing about family planning, nothing about population growth. What we talked about was, how do you have a happy family? How do you get success with having a happy family? And you do it by having maybe 1 or 2 kids, not 3 or 4 or 5, because you can't educate 5 kids, but you can educate 2 and space them well. So our slogan was, girls are as good as boys, have 2 children and space them well. That was not part of the Korean culture. But we didn't impose it from the top. Instead, we let it leak up from the bottom. And our 2,400 field staff, 1 in every myeon. A myeon is like a neighborhood. and they have them in the city and they have them in the countryside. So one field worker in every myon, a woman, and she was rewarded by getting $4 for every woman who she took to the clinic. We had a 4-part coupon. This is my genius, was to design a paper coupon. So the 4-part coupon, part 1 went to the doctor. He got $4. Part 2 went to the clinic. They got $4. Part 3 went to the woman herself. She got $4. And part 4 went to the field worker, and she got $4. So it cost $16 of United Nations money and Korean government money to take a family from we're going to have 6 kids to we're going to have only 2, and we're going to space them well. That little miracle changed the culture. Mm-hmm. It permeated the culture, starting from the bottom and going up. And as a consequence, the average Korean now has 1.6 kids. They exceeded the goal. Girls are valued over boys in Korea now. And their population now is about 45 million. It went from 30 to almost 50. Now it's coming down, about 45 million. And it's going to keep going down. The average per capita income went from $800 a year to $35,000 a year, because demography is destiny. And so that's the experience from family planning in Korea. Then I took that same program and I spent 3 years in Taiwan working with the people on the island of Taiwan with the same concept. Then I spent 3 years in the Philippines, and we had the same concept going in the Philippines. Marcos was the president. Well, unfortunately, when the new regime came in, Corazon Aquino, the new president, made a deal with the cardinal of the Catholic Church, Cardinal Jaime Sin, Cardinal Sin, to dissolve the family planning program. We had clinics in every county, and we had field workers in almost every village, and it was disbanded. So now we look at the consequence. In the Philippines, the population went coincidentally from 30 million, mm-hmm. as they had in Korea, to 100 million. And the population pyramid looks like this, with very few elder people and many, many young people. And those young people are going to work their way up through the population. They're going to double it again. Mm-hmm. So where Korea started with 30 million and is destined to get back to 30 million, the Philippines started with 30 million and is destined to have 200 million. The average per capita income, which was about the same as it was in Korea, is now approaching $2,000. So again, demography is destiny. Well, how do we take that lesson and apply it to what we're dealing with climate change? I think, mm-hmm. for me, it is work at the village level, work with the women, work with the families. Don't talk about climate change. Don't talk about global warming. Don't talk about sea level rise. Talk about how you have a successful life. And what's important in life is balance between people and the environment. Don't use so many pesticides. Don't dig where you don't have to dig. Don't ruin the countryside. So the things that we want to talk about are tangential to the solution. The solution comes about because we change our culture. So let's change the culture. In our country, changing the culture means to change the way that we feel about big oil and big auto and big meat, to tamp that down. In other countries, it's different. But that's what you've got to do, is work on your relationship to the environment, your relationship to the next generation. I love the Native American saying that we must plan for the 7th generation. And we're not doing that. We're not even planning for the 2nd generation. So it's time to get back on the program that was in North America when the immigrants started arriving from all over the rest of the world. And that was a program to plan for the 7th generation. And we do that at the village level. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Dev, for your very good analysis. Even I can understand you understand the Asia Pacific culture. This is very important. We have our another friend, Mr. Raikons Volta. I am coming back to you. We have our other speakers. He's a famous writer. So, Professor Viva, you are a great scholar and you have very interesting innovations. You are working with UN and with your companies. So, you always discuss about policy. So how developing nations, even countries from Asia, they can develop better policy based on climate change, and what is the role of the policymaker? What is your advice?
Well, I think that the grassroots needs to talk to the top, very much in Asian countries, because I think that the only people that Western culture listens to are the top people in Asia, and other places in the world. I think that the international community, it's a peer-to-peer thing that you have to encourage. And also, the other thing that needs to be analyzed is the relationship between politicians and big corporations that are big taxpayers. We know that a lot of times we see wealthy and influential people hobnobbing, at Davos and these other meetings, and they're very good to each other. But I think we need to remind the politicians that they govern the wealthy from their platform. They're the only ones that do. So some good news came out this past week with the G7, and I think that Asia should support it. And that was a 20% tax on multinational corporations across the board in all the G7, so that none of the multinationals could shop for cheap tax haven countries. So I think this is what we need to do, is to support moves where the politicians are actually properly governing the wealthy and the wealth itself of our world. And I think it makes a lot of sense, because G7 is, should be taxing everybody. Everybody should pay their taxes. That's an obvious principle, but it is not applied across the board. So this is a positive move. Although some people fear that we're going to lose freedom, I highly doubt it from this. This is a very targeted policy, and it has limits on what it's going to impact. So I think it's a very positive step, because the G7 countries are still struggling for tax revenue to cover the extra cost to harden infrastructure against climate change. So we can encourage, Western people can encourage the governments to use the extra money to help those who are impacted negatively by climate change, and also to help finance per capita reparations on everybody's carbon footprint. So this is the kind of place where the money is going to come from, and it's also a very positive signal that there are politicians who are willing to properly govern wealth and govern the wealthy that hold the wealth as well. So I think Asia should support that, Asian people at the grassroots level, and encourage their leaders to encourage this kind of policy specifically. There hopefully will be more innovations like this, But I think right now that's pretty positive. Thanks, Sharif.
Thank you, Professor, for your very good analysis on policy making. And we need better policy. Definitely, we need better policy based on climate change issues and government. We cannot actually avoid government. We need to work with the governments. We need support from government. We need to collaborate with government. So this is very, very important. And definitely, World Talent Economy Forum, we want to work more on policy level. And from our speakers, those who are interested, those who want to support our initiative, we can negotiate with the government that how we can develop their policies and other things. Hopefully they will support us, but we need intellectual people like you, those who can help us, guide us. We can work together to contribute in the policy level, because policy is most important. Mr. Jamsid, you have a very good background from corporation as well. Corporate actually play major roles even in climate change. Like even sometimes they actually help to make decisions what area government should focus. It can be green technology, it can be different. What is your observations? What, like, how the corporate leaders should play their role right now?
Thank you, Sharif. What I've observed has been gratifying in the sense that the corporate leaders have made some significant changes in their approach fairly recently, but still it's inspiring to see. Some people have made significant changes to their places of work, allowing people to work remotely. The COVID pandemic helped force that. But now people are not necessarily commuting to work as much as they used to. It's a quality of life issue, but it's also environmentally beneficial. So there's a lot of awakeness in terms of what the corporate responsibility is. And we've always had corporate leaders, people that have given back to the communities. Some of when they make profit, their employees make profit, and they fund things in their local communities. And we've always had people like that, but we've also had takers. We've also had a lot of corporate takers who are just interested in the quarterly reports. If my quarterly report, the numbers are good, my stock goes up, we make more money. Now, that kind of thinking is very difficult to change because what we really are fundamentally, we're talking about politics, we're talking about politicians, we're talking about policy, but economics plays a huge role in this as well. And the simple fact of the matter is unregulated free market capitalism contains the seeds of its own destruction. Over a century ago, Teddy Roosevelt ran on the campaign of busting trusts. And by that, he meant monopolies, because what we found with unregulated free market capitalism is that inevitably monopolies took over. And you know what? Monopolies stifle competition. So what's good about capitalism was taken away. So we had to bust it, and then it would come back. We had to bust it again. And then monopolies, we had to break up AT&T, for example, and we created baby bells, is what they call them. But this is a constant cycle, it seems, because we fall back in complacency to the way it used to be. And we think that that this idea of unregulated free market, like people are anti-regulations, but it's so important to have regulations, because we used to dump toxic waste into our rivers, and we said, well, it creates jobs, so why make them pay a cost? Well, there's an environmental cost to it, and you can't ignore it, because the people downstream were getting, the flora and fauna were dying. They were being poisoned. So these consequences have a cost, and they must be paid for. And so now, okay, when we start taking note of that is when our rivers caught fire. When water doesn't burn, it boils. But when they were catching fire, we go, maybe man has a role in this. Maybe the stuff we're dumping in the rivers is what's burning. Maybe we ought to pass regulations so that people can't just keep pouring toxic waste into our rivers. So what do? Now we have islands of plastic in the oceans. What are we waiting for before we take action? Oh, go ahead, Viv.
James, I just want to interject here that, it's a real game, and it's not even, it's a dangerous game, but we are looking at our pollution, who's going to pay it, the polluter or the taxpayer? Those are the
Mhm,
two choices we have. We have no other choices. And so
mhm,
this is where the governance comes in, I think,
mhm, mhm,
encouraging that governance. The politicians need to know they're protecting the taxpayer when they're going after the polluter. And
mhm.
we know it's a must have because we have so much pollution that's unresolved, right? Yeah, so that's just what I wanted to introduce.
Yeah, and
Yes.
an
Mhm,
ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So, nobody has to pay to clean up if we don't make a mess in the first place. So, stopping pollution before we have to clean it up is a much sounder approach to the problem. Don't do it, and you don't have to pay for the cost of cleaning it up. So,
mhm,
and this is when we start with ourselves and change ourselves, change our communities, and then keep going. Who knows where it'll stop? Because we're all in this together. And this is not just my problem. It's not just your problem. It's our problem. So we have to change our policies with that in mind too. And we can't play nation versus nation, because America first is America alone. And we don't want to be alone in this because
mhm,
no one alone will solve these problems. We have to do it together. The solution has to be done together. Thanks again,
mhm.
Sharif.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. James. We have our two youth representatives. One is Raikons Volta, and another one is Mr. Manuel from two different countries. We want to learn how we can grow youth leadership. So, Raikon, what's your observations and what do you want to share about climate change leadership in terms of youth point of view?
I recognize that trying to clean up our environment is a very important issue, but my main area of interest has always been futurism and artificial intelligence. So
Mhm,
I guess with relation to the environment, I would be interested in, since I read a lot about artificial intelligence, thinking about how artificial intelligence systems like machine learning algorithms and deep learning algorithms can be used to help strategize and find solutions for cleaning up the environment and reversing global warming.
mhm. Thank you,
So
Mr.
I
Manuel.
think that
Yes, yes, you can continue. No problem.
in as machine learning and artificial intelligence is advancing this decade, we will be able to solve a lot of issues in the coming decade with AI, and that we should be looking more strongly at using those tools to actually fix the environment so that we can not only advance the human race but also clean up Mother Earth.
Mhm. Thank you, Mr. Manuel.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, I would say that some of our climate activists in the world today are young, are very young. So
Mhm,
I would say that involving the young generation is also an option. But what I would like to add is it will be good if we can help them to improve um, their knowledge, like in the educational way. For example, the young people who are interested in policy making, in economics, and maybe international relations. Yeah, like we can help them, support them, so that they can get the knowledge they need for policy making, economics, and yeah, international relations. Now, the young people who are interested into technology and science, then we can help them to improve their knowledge in those fields, and we can also help them to understand how, by using those technologies, they can actually apply those technologies to solve the climate change. Yeah,
mhm.
that's what I would like to add.
Thank you. So we have our expert panelists, Professor Dev, Professor Viva, and Jamsit. Professor Dev, we get two important aspects from youth. Number one, youth community actually like more technology, technological involvement. And number two, we can also involve youth communities for policy makings as well as this kind of like technological involvement and other things. This is the observations from two youth speakers from two different countries. So what do you want to add? How we can do that? How we can fulfill the youth community's requirement through these climate change activities?
Well, I don't like to see the youth taken in isolation.
Yes.
The thing that bothers me about the current approach, one of the many things, is that we were at a Earth Day celebration a year and a half ago when we were allowed to be outside and talking to each other, and a panel of youth got up and started blaming and scoriating the elder generation for not having done anything. And most of the people in the audience have been working their whole lives on climate and environment and going green and healthy environment and so forth. And we were all sitting there going, oh my God, these guys don't get it. They're standing on the shoulders of giants. It's like telling David Attenborough how to take pictures. You have to realize, I think, that we're all in this together. This is an intergenerational problem, and it's got to have an intergenerational solution. Like it or not, the elder generation controls the wealth right now. So if the young generation comes up with a wonderful solution, they still got to get somebody to pay for it. So if we aren't working together, then we're going to end up with a bigger problem than we started with. My book, the Green Actioneers Workbook, we're changing the name, by the way. It's going to be the Green Actioneers Activity Book because workbook sounds scary. So it's going to be the activity book. And it was put together by 60 students, undergraduate students at the University of Central Florida. I assigned each of them 2 topics to write up. So here's one, take shorter showers. So some kid spent 15 hours in this semester doing research on the use of electricity and hot water and so forth. Here's one on vacation or staycation. So somebody took time to do that. Well, this isn't the bulk of it. This is just the tip of the iceberg. The website has what they wrote. So by working intergenerationally with 60 undergraduate students, we're able to say, quite rightfully, that we're doing something that is across the culture. We're not only a couple of old guys. The artist is in his 70s and I'm in my 80th year. And it's not just a couple of old guys who decided to write a book. No, it's a couple of old guys who asked a lot of young people to help them to write a book. And so we end up with a book that has a lot more value that way. So I think that's what we've got to focus on, is not segmenting society further, but instead uniting us. Again, the Native American approach is that it's not me, it's us. And us doesn't just include these other people. Us includes all the animals, all the plants, the sun, the moon, day and night. It's all one thing. And so our problem, I think, to a large extent, is this segmentation, the creation of systems that break people and ideas up into pockets. And then that's your PhD dissertation. You work on that thing and you become an expert at that thing. Well, once you're an expert at that thing, I hope you still can understand how you fit within the whole. And so as you become an expert, remember that you're only an expert at one thing, and that there are other experts out there at other things, and that you all have to work together. And so it's that cooperative work that's going to get us through this, not by going off on your own and solving this. It's something that is going to take a change of consciousness and a change of culture. And it's going to have to be permeating society. So that's why my approach is to start with families, young families. Now, the reason I do young families, I work with elementary school kids and parents. The reason I work with elementary and not high school is because elementary school parents will come to school in the evening because they're interested in what their kids are learning and they love their kids so much. In fact, that's one of the two most powerful forces in the universe, the love of parents for their kids. And the second most powerful force in the universe is the nagging power of those kids. So we're going to organize those two forces, the love of parents for their kids and the nagging power of those kids, to work together as families within a community, the community being the school, within a system, the system being their larger community, their town, their county, within a much larger community, their nation, within the planet. And the quicker we can get that done, the better. So that's my focus. My focus is getting the Green Actioneers activity book published this fall. It's going to be available at family night in schools so that the whole family will get one of these when they come in to the family night, and they'll sit down together and go through it together and decide what they want to do. And then the person who's leading this, in some cases it'll be me, says, okay, have you figured out what you're going to do? And they've had the book for about 15 minutes now. And then if you got something you want to tell us, raise your hand. And then the hand goes up and some kid stands up and says, we're going to start wearing a sweater instead of fooling with a thermostat because it saves energy. And then I say, well, everybody who can do that, look at your grown-up. If your grown-up gives you the thumbs up, I want you to jump up and say, we can do that too. So now I got a whole room full of kids jumping up and saying, we can do that too. And they do that for as many of these as they wish. And then I finally say, okay, now I'm going to add 2. First, put solar panels on your house. Well, all the kids are going to jump up and say, we can do that too. And then say, drive an electric car. And then all the kids are going to jump up and say, we can do that too. Then the next thing we do is really important. We congratulate them for what they've done. We tell them they can keep the book and take the book home with them. And then I say, if any of you grown-ups want to be on the green team for the school, raise your hand. Well, now I've got 20 grown-ups with their hands in the air. I say, if your hand is in the air, stand up. If you're standing, come to the front of the room. Now I've got 20 grown-ups lined up in the front of the room. Everybody knows this is the green team for the school. I say, Mr. Principal, take a picture. This is your green team. Now, the job of the green team is to make sure that everybody does what they say they're going to do. So everybody's got a book. Everybody's promised they're going to do what's in the book. So green team, your job is to supervise. Make sure it all gets done. So that means you're going to have to meet. Well, we've got 2 organizations that have decided they want to help us out. One is called Navigator Scouts. And Navigator Scouts is like Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, but it includes everybody. They'll take gay kids, they'll take kids who are atheists, they'll take any kid in Navigator Scouts. So Navigator Scouts are going to help us. The second group is called Green Team Superheroes. And Green Team Superheroes will do it if they don't want to form a Navigator Scout troop. So we've got a plan. We're starting a movement. I mean, this movement is going to go nationwide and eventually worldwide. And it starts this fall when school starts again. And I'm going to spend my 80s, which will be your 20s, going through this book with families all over the United States and Canada and elsewhere in the world. And every Sunday night at 7, I'm going to hold a Zoom call for anybody who wants to be in on it to learn how to deliver this program themselves. So they can then buy books, distribute books, and run the program themselves in their own school. And this applies to anybody anywhere in the world. The book is in English and Spanish. It could be in English and Malay. It could be in English and Bahasa. It could be in English and Korean. Yeah, I think it's important to keep the English in there since that's sort of what everybody eventually ends up using on international calls. But I'm looking forward to people getting in touch with me about taking this program to their country also. I'm Dave Finnegan at greenactioneers.com. If anybody wants to do this, I'm very happy to have you take the program and run it in your country, because it's going to be a world changer. I'm so excited about it because I know it's going to work. It's a culmination of 79 plus years of thinking about this. Thanks a lot. Sorry to talk so long.
Thank you, Professor Viva. I'm sure you have many interesting idea for leadership development. What is your advice? How we can do this? And I think they are very interested, especially youth communities, about new innovation, new technology. So how technology can play a major role to solve this climate change?
Okay, there are two questions there. The first, for the youth, I think anybody can be asking this question now because even as youth, we're all future taxpayers. And that is, when it comes to a pollution issue, who's going to pay for it? Who's going to pay for the cleanup? Is it going to be the taxpayer or is it going to be the polluter? Or is it going to be a combination thereof? And that's a great question to put forward to your leaders. Okay? If you do that now with climate change, the leaders will then look at the leaders in the Western countries, and hopefully it will help lubricate a dialogue on that level. Really, who is going to pay? It's a question I think we need to ask all over the world for pollution events that happened decades ago that are still happening. Frankly, we still have no statute of limitations on ongoing plume events. There are things that are still unaddressed. We have a historical level of greenhouse gases that are decades old, floating around in the atmosphere. The courts cannot say that there's a statute of limitations on something that's already ongoing. So that would be the question I would ask. And what was the other question? Oh, the technology. Well, right now we know there are a lot of technologies that are being put forward. There's like 180 entries in the X Prize carbon removal competition. So what we need is to encourage responsible science-based evaluations of all of the technologies that are being put forward. And then we actually have to begin, a long time ago, we should have began already shortlisting technologies. But the politicians, I think, have been so muddled about where they're going to get the money to pay for pollution problems. First of all, I think we have to get them clarity on that, and then get more clarity on what kind of remediation is going to happen. Is it going to be nature-based? Is it going to be heavily engineered, lightly engineered? All these questions need to be asked. And the technologies themselves, looking at them, going through the process of shortlisting them, I would encourage people to write Alok Sharma, that's A-L-O-K, Sharma, S-H-A-R-M-A. He is the chair of COP26, and encourage him to do what you think is necessary at the United Nations level. I have written a couple of letters to him telling him that they need to be shortlisting technology now, and not running around trying to get everybody committing to a certain amount of reduction. That should happen at the same time. So we need, everything to be happening all at once, which means that the individual has to, do a little bit of multitasking, which, for our youth, I really have to compliment people like the youth in the world that are the climate strike for climate, that are out in the public and also writing letters. Those two things, I think, are the two things that are going to make the change. And it's asking the right questions, that, and having the politicians understand that you understand the burning question: who is paying for the pollution? Is it going to be the taxpayer in 30 years, or is it going to be the polluter? So those are just some things that I think will help nudge everything forward in the political policy direction.
Mhm. Mhm.
In
Thank
the
you.
same
Thank you.
vein, I think it's really important that we tax carbon, and not one country at a time, but worldwide. Put a tax on carbon, and use that money to clean up. Now, plastic is another issue. I think we've got to tax plastic, tax the heck out of it, and I know that means there's going to be competition between countries. Well, you taxed them, but you're not taxing me. I think we really have to, as a world, get together on these two issues, and we've got to really think about what we're going to do with these two things, with the carbon and with plastic, because they're out of control. And as Viva says, they're not paying for their cleanup. We are. So it's time to tax the heck out of them and then use that money for the cleanup. But then one country will say, well, we're not going to do that. We're just going to let them go. And then that country will become the big plastic manufacturer. So we've got to make this into an international agreement to tax plastic and tax carbon.
Mhm.
I agree.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Jamsid.
Thank you, Sharif. Yeah, this is really inspirational. And I mean that seriously. I'm inspired. And because it's so easy to get into despair, to think these problems are too big for anyone to solve. But what we're even seeing the G7 getting together to say, hey, let's make a worldwide base tax. So this is the kind of thing that we can do. Let's include that to carbon. Let's include that to plastic. Yeah, because we have islands of plastic in our oceans now. This is insane. So we can either keep doing what we've been doing, or we can change. And we don't want to get into the blame game. I've heard this, and I want to emphasize this. Because I'm a baby boomer, and yeah, we did a lot of damage, and you can blame us for a lot. You can blame us for the music you have to put up with, because it's still popular and you still hear it on the radio. And it's not the kind of music you want to hear. I get it, but the idea of blaming someone else for these problems is not the same as finding a solution to these problems. And I do believe that it is intergenerational, because the elder people in the world have experience that the young can learn from, take advantage from. And the young people have the energy to make these things happen, to transform what's in your mind into reality, to make it real, manifest it. And these things have to work together. So the idea, we also have opposing forces everywhere we turn. We have to persevere through them, because we are told, go forth and multiply, but the world is overpopulated. So what are we going to do? Well, when the world was underpopulated, go forth and multiply made sense. Does it make sense now? Ask ourselves these reality-based questions. And do we have to do planning? Yes, we have to do planning. And this doesn't mean you have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There may be many things that teach you good and just value systems. But the idea of having 6 children when 2 might be what's necessary today in the global environment that we're all facing, these might be reality-based solutions. So you can have both the value system that you were taught and the rational approach to living a good, healthy, productive life today, as today is. So these are not necessarily contradictions. I really, really appreciated these things, what we've been talking about, and you putting us all together, Sharif. I really do. And we want to concentrate on appropriate technology. I wanted to say this because in the African countries that I'm working on, water purification is really one of the things that we're working hard on. And water purification systems requires technology and it requires investment. So these things, you can't do one without the other. You can't have a good idea. You can't just magically wave a wand and say your water is pure. No, you've got to get someone who can manufacture the water purification equipment, distribute it to where it is needed. And also the appropriate technology. Don't build a windmill where there's no wind. Don't build a solar panel where there's no sun. But when there's a lot of sun, build a solar panel. Where there's a lot of wind, build a wind turbine. So these things are not polluting. They're green energy sources where they're appropriate. So we have to apply some common sense, some wisdom, which the older you get, the more you value. These types of things can make a difference. And not if just a couple of us are doing them. It takes a critical mass of us doing them. And when we achieve that critical mass, we achieve social change. And this is what we want. But we have a lot of obstacles. Our Congress is like, this side is pushing this side. If this side says A, this side will say B. And, so we're not functional today. Does that mean we're going to be functional tomorrow or dysfunctional tomorrow? No, it can change. The future is unpredictable. And don't live in the past. In the 1950s, we had Leave It to Beaver and I Love Lucy. And were those real reality-based TV shows? Well, some of us want to return to those days that never really existed in the first place. So don't live in the past and don't think you can predict the future with any degree of accuracy. But you can apply common sense. You can be discerning in what you do and how it will probably affect the future, and guide yourself first and influence those in your sphere of influence and teach them to influence others. This is how leadership works. You walk the talk, people see it, people change their behavior, and the people they come in contact see that their behavior has changed, and hey, maybe that's a good idea for me. And it keeps growing, it keeps spreading. And the young people, I don't mean, it is an intergenerational solution, but the young people have to be stepping up to the plate. They have to be the leaders. You've got the energy that I don't have anymore at the same level. So you've got to do it. You've got to be the ones that walk the talk. Got to know what the talk is, then you got to walk it. These are the things, and use the technologies that exist and will be products of your young minds to apply them appropriately. And these problems, whatever they are, they're not too big to solve. We can solve them, but not if we wait for someone else to do it. We've got to do what we can for ourselves, by ourselves, and for others. Forget this, let me build walls around my house and keep everyone else out of it. This is not, you don't want to be thinking about yourself only. Thinking about others is the way to be happy. This I've learned. through my life experience, and I want to share it. You make yourself happy if you help others. And we're all in this together. If you help yourself, you help others. And if helping others helps yourself, it works like that. I don't know why, but that's the way it works. Thanks again, Sharif.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Manuel.
Yes. Hello.
Yes, basically we are discussing about the roles and responsibilities and how youth communities and the policymakers they can work together and we can do some positive change. Yes. So what's your advice and guideline?
Okay, sure. So I think, like Professor Vaiva mentioned it's important that the government institutions collaborate with the the institutions that are actually going to provide the money that is needed for the different projects. And also, like Mr. James mentioned it's important to explore the market and know what exactly is needed. Because if we are talking about technologies in the sense of climate change, we cannot bring the technology that's not needed in a specific region to that region. It will just not give us the result that we need. So it's important to explore the region to know what is needed before bringing up the technology. And also the involvement of the younger generation, like Mr. Dev mentioned it's important that as young generation we should understand that we we don't know a lot. It's like the older generation, they have more experience and they know more than us. So we need to listen to them and hear from them and learn from them, yeah, as well. And then like through intergenerational collaboration, I think that can help to achieve the climate change, to solve the climate change issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Raikon Bholta. So do you want to share something? Can you hear me?
Um, I've been out a little bit because of the rain that just happened. I found a place underneath a ceiling so that I can be out of the rain now. But I wasn't really following the last bit of the conversation. That's why.
Mhm. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I directly want to go for the concluding remarks for today. Before I go for the concluding remarks, I just want to share our content as much as possible. Share. I know the many people from Sri Lanka, Malaysia, Bangladesh, India, Indonesia, Vietnam, Singapore, those who are observing our shows, you share our content as much as possible. Even I know our speakers, they are also very influential. They can share in between their community. This is help us to understand that how we can develop a better ecosystem. This is our objective, how we can grow our ecosystem properly with the help of government, with the help of corporations, as well as with the help of different youth communities and the populations. So this is our objective. We want to develop a better ecosystem. Climate change is real. Even in the COVID-19 situation, I request everyone, be careful. Malaysia right now lockdown. So yes, vaccine is very important. So I think everybody should take their vaccine, and even the developed nations, they should help the developing nations to get vaccines, because this is life is very important. So that's why I request all of the biotechnologies and other things, they can share their views and everything. And most important thing is that we will discuss about biotechnology tomorrow, and we have our conference on the health science, even climate change and many things from this month, 28 June to 2 Junes, because we have a huge audience and speakers from around the world, those who want to join in these things. So we have to, last time we do 2 days summit, this time we have to do 5 days summit. because we want to give equal chance. Last time, every time we cannot give chance to everyone because of the huge demand. We have to extend. So this time we will discuss on the health science and how we can develop this area. So the speakers, they can join in these things. And beside that, I want to add, because World Talent Economy Forum, we are growing. Many problem actually coming to us. Many issues actually we have to solve right now because of the educational problem, even climate change. Many real problem are coming. So we need support, we need collaboration, and we are going for fundraising, because fundraising actually help us to engage with more people, we to engage with more countries. Even different country has different problems. Someone has water related problem, someone has health related problem, someone has education related problem. Many problems actually coming to us. We want your support, we want your help, because with the teamwork, maybe we can solve many big problem. So I request everyone, our speaker, our audience, even the policymakers, the governments, even the whatever the organization, they are observing our shows, the think tanks. We need more collaboration, more partnership, and more support. This fundraising actually help us to solve more problem. So thank you everyone for joining today's session. I'm sure this kind of content actually really helpful for the developing nations, for Asian communities, even for the global communities. Anybody can join, anybody can share. It can be from Africa, it can be from Asia, from Europe, from North America. Anybody can share our content, and by this way, we can create real awareness. So I want to start this concluding remarks. I want to start from Professor Dave, then Professor Viva, then Mr. Jamesit, then Raikons, and finally Mr. Manuel. Professor Dave.
Okay, I've never used this feature, but if I share my screen, does this work? If I share it, I'd like to try it. Does that make sense? Because I want to
Yes,
show
definitely.
this right here. Do you see my stairway?
No,
Is it visible?
no, still no.
Pardon? No? Okay. If the system doesn't allow it, but you should be seeing a multicolored stairway that goes up from awareness to advocacy. Is that visible?
No, just share button. You can use
Okay,
this
I'll
share
just tell
button.
you about it.
Okay.
Yeah, you do have that. You have that chart though. Oh, I see. Yeah, I don't want to choose cancel that. The problem is that a lot of people are aware that there's a problem, but they don't know what to do. And so there's a step-by-step process that we should be leading people through that we are remiss in not understanding. And that starts with awareness, yes, but then it has to go to interest. They have to be interested in doing something. And that's what our book does. It gives them an interest. And then they have to try something. They have to, from interest, you go to trial and you see how that works. And then you evaluate the trial and you see, did that succeed? Did I actually save money by doing that? Did I actually save energy by doing that? And you do that again with another thing and another and another. Most people don't go straight from awareness to advocacy like we do. Most people have to go through trial, interest, trial, interest, trial, interest, until finally they get to the point where they evaluate that and become an adopter. And now they are part of the program instead of being part of the problem. Then other people in their society, neighbors, friends, or in our case, classmates in the school, will confirm what they've been doing and say, oh, you're doing a great job. And that makes them into advocates. And so climbing that stairway is really important, going from awareness to interest to trial to evaluation, trial, evaluation, trial, evaluation, adoption, confirmation, advocacy. And that's what we have to take the whole world through now. We have to go up that stairway and get people to the point where they all become advocates. So there's nobody left out. Everybody agrees that this is what we need to do. Now, that doesn't mean we go work with the people who are most resistant now. We work with the early adopters first. And then from the early adopters, we go to the early majority. And then we start working on the laggards. But don't waste your time with the laggards. The laggards aren't going to jump on board. Let them sit all by themselves for a while, and then they will come on eventually. But it's a step-by-step process, and we're just getting started. I am looking forward to my 80s, because by the time I'm in my 90s, we will have done this. Thanks a lot. I'm Dave Finnegan. It's Green Actioneers.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Viva.
I'm here. I want to share my screen. I think I know how to do it. You have to tap twice. There are two ways to do it. So
yes.
Here, can you see?
Yes.
Okay.
We see
this
it.
is a graph that I'm trying to get bigger here. This graph, when it was released, it's the percentage of CO2 emissions by world population. I know that when we are trying to change the culture, we don't want to do a blame game. But the other side of that coin is that science can help discern where the root cause of a problem may lie by the statistics that are gathered. So this graph is very helpful because it states very clearly that the richest 10% are responsible in lifestyle emissions for almost half of the total lifestyle consumption emissions. So my message to Asia is that the youth need to know that Western people and scientists are aware of where the sources of the highest carbon footprint are coming from. They've been analyzed, they've been discerned, and we're working on ways to deal with that so that we change the trajectory as quickly as possible. So here again, we can ask our politicians to ask the Western politicians, what are you doing about the heavy polluter? Who's going to pay for their carbon footprint? The taxpayer, or are they going to pay for it? Or is the polluter themselves going to pay for it? So this question again is worth asking. So I just wanted to add that in. You know, in conclusion, I'd just like to direct you to our website, and it's reductiontech.com, all one word, and we will be updating as we move through the X Prize competition, which is a 4-year commitment, and hopefully we come out the other end as one of the top ranked competitors, because we have a nature-based solution. It is nature-based. It mimics the natural hydroxyl radical levels that are found, and actually enhances them in nature, because they are terribly overwhelmed by a factor of 100. So we've already crossed an exponential threshold with our own Mother Nature's cleanser in the atmosphere. And it's important for all of us to know that was done, that crossing over happened probably in around 2007. So we've been overtaxing with pollution for quite a long time, just with respect to the hydroxyl radical, which is generated in the environment for us. So thank you, Sharif. I'll leave you with that, and wish everybody good luck on their journey helping to direct politicians on what to do.
Thank you. Thank you. Excellent. Mr. Jamsit.
Thank you again, Sharif. This has been a wonderful show. I always learn something on the shows that you produce, and today was no exception. I've changed my background because I want to make a point that we've been talking about building walls. There's plenty of walls between us. We don't want to build more of them. We want to tear down the walls. And that's because we're in this together. And if you think you can't help make a change, you're just another brick in the wall. So get up, get out, educate yourself, make a difference. If everybody does it, great. If half the people do it, great. If just a quarter of the people, great. Because you will be inspiration. You will inspire others to do their part. And this is how it works. It starts locally and expands. And where does it stop? Who knows? Don't give up. Persevere. Because the change that we must make in our societies, in our globe, is change that has to start somewhere. Let it be with you. Change yourself first. Change others that you are in your sphere of influence. And who knows, you might start a Green Actioneers program of your own. And by the time you're 80, you'll have all sorts of people reading your book. So who knows what the future holds? Just be part of the solution and not part of the problem. You know, when I was a kid and I walked my dog in the woods in the back, I didn't know when I was in Massachusetts or when I was in Vermont, there was no border there. The borders are artificial, man-made. Mountain ranges, oceans, rivers, those are natural borders. Those are boundaries that we understand. They're natural. But the ones that we carve up on maps and atlases and globes, those are artificial, you know. And it doesn't matter what country you're from. It doesn't matter what language you speak. It doesn't matter what you look like. We're all in this together. And if you're in the Southeast Asia, you know, don't copy what the United States did. You know, when I was starting out as a kid, what we were doing, you envy our wealth. Well, guess what? It came at a cost. And if you copy what we did and you get wealth the way we got it, then you will be part of the problem, not part of a solution, because the pollution that you generate, there's a time of no return. We'll reach that point sooner rather than later. And then no matter what technology we have, no matter what brilliant artificial intelligence we use, it will be too late. We are already experiencing extinction level events. There are flora and fauna that are no longer viable. There are insects, good insects, that are no longer viable. And insects that do damage are just thriving. So, you know, we've got to change the environment. And it's a complicated, complex issue, no question about it. But if we all do it together, pardon me, that's my note that I have to leave. And it's a good time to wrap up. I think that was a shot from above to tell me to stop talking. And I must go, but I applaud you, Sharif, for putting these brilliant minds together. And I just want to say, be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And don't do what we did. You can do better. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mr. Raikun, what's your concluding remarks today?
If you're interested in reading a post-apocalyptic novel that is about the hunt for an ancient AI, then check out my debut novel, Erendite. You can see it in my description right there. And prepare for a great adventure across the solar system.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mr. Manuel, what's your concluding remarks for today?
Okay, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation. So, yeah, to conclude, I would like to add 2 points. The first point is, like most of the guest speakers mentioned it, international collaboration is very important to solve the climate change issues. And the second point is social responsibility and ethics should be implemented both by corporates and non-corporates, like in our own society, in our own families, and governments should also help with their policies to achieve that. So thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining today's session. So share our content as much as possible. And this is really great sessions and really helpful for the youth communities. Thank you, Professor Viva, Professor Dev, Mr. Manuel, and Mr. Raikon. Thank you everyone. Bye-bye and take care.
Thank you.